The fancy restaurant was filled with the sound of glasses clinking and people laughing. Bright lights hung from the ceiling, making everything look shiny and expensive. At table number 7, the Henderson family sat together, dressed in their best clothes. They were celebrating something huge. Their company had just been bought by a mysterious billionaire, and everyone was about to meet him for the first time. Sarah Henderson sat at the edge of the table, her hands shaking slightly as she held her wine glass. She wore a dark blue dress that her mother had picked out for her. Her blonde hair was tied back neatly, but a few strands had fallen loose. She looked nervous, very nervous. "Relax, Sarah," her younger brother, Marcus, whispered with a grin. "This billionaire is about to make us all rich. Smile a little." Sarah tried to smile, but something felt wrong in her stomach. It was like a bad feeling she couldn't shake off. Her father, Richard Henderson, stood up at the head of the table. He was a tall man with gray hair and a big smile. He looked very proud. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard said loudly, raising his glass, "tonight is a special night. Our family business, Henderson Industries, has been purchased by one of the wealthiest men in the world. And he's agreed to meet us here tonight." Everyone at the table clapped and cheered. Sarah's mother, Linda, wiped a happy tear from her eye. Her older sister, Victoria, checked her makeup in a small mirror, making sure she looked perfect. "I wonder what he looks like," Victoria said with a dreamy smile. "Rich, powerful, probably very handsome." Sarah felt her heart beating faster. She didn't know why, but she had the strange, terrible feeling that something bad was about to happen. Then the restaurant doors opened. A tall man walked in. He wore an expensive black suit that fit him perfectly. His dark hair was combed back, and his shoes were so shiny they reflected the lights. He walked with confidence, like someone who owned the entire world. Sarah's wine glass slipped from her hand. It fell in slow motion, tumbling through the air before crashing onto the table with a loud crash. Wine spilled everywhere, staining the white tablecloth dark red. But Sarah didn't notice. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. She couldn't think. Because the billionaire walking toward their table was him. The man she had divorced 5 years ago. The man she had left because he was going nowhere in life. The man her entire family had laughed at and called a loser, Daniel Carter. And now he was standing right in front of them, smiling calmly as her father shook his hand with joy. "Mr. Carter, welcome, welcome," Richard said happily. "We're so honored to finally meet you." Daniel's eyes slowly moved across the table, and then they landed on Sarah. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Sarah's face turned completely white. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Daniel's smile didn't change, but his eyes told a different story. They were cold, very cold. "Hello, everyone," Daniel said smoothly. "I'm so glad to finally meet the Henderson family." He paused, his gaze still locked on Sarah. "I've heard so much about you. But before we continue this crazy story, drop a comment below and tell me, where in the world are you watching this from? I love hearing from you all. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button to support our growth. You won't regret it. This story is about to get wild. Now, let's go back to the beginning and see how we got to this insane moment. 5 years ago, Sarah's life was very different. She lived in a small apartment with her husband, Daniel Carter. The apartment wasn't fancy. The walls had cracks, the heater didn't work very well, and sometimes they could hear their neighbors arguing through the thin walls. But back then, Sarah didn't mind. She was in love. Daniel was kind and gentle. He worked hard every day at his job as a software engineer at a small company. He wasn't rich, but he always made sure Sarah had everything she needed. He would cook dinner for her when she came home tired. He would rub her feet while they watched TV. He would kiss her forehead and tell her everything would be okay. "We're going to make it, Sarah," Daniel would say with a warm smile. "I promise. Just give me time. I'm working on something big." Daniel spent every night in their tiny second bedroom, which he had turned into an office. He would sit at his old desk with papers and laptops scattered everywhere, typing away on his computer for hours and hours. "What are you working on?" Sarah would ask sometimes, peeking through the door. A project, Daniel would say mysteriously. Something that could change our lives. Sarah believed him. She really did. But her family, they didn't. Every Sunday, Sarah and Daniel would go to the Henderson family house for dinner. It was a huge house in the rich part of town, with tall white pillars and a fountain in the front yard. Sarah's family was wealthy. Very wealthy. Her father owned Henderson Industries, a big company that made parts for airplanes and cars. They had money, power, and respect. And they hated Daniel. "So, Daniel," Richard would say at dinner, cutting his steak with a sharp knife. "Still working at that, what do you call it? That little computer company?" Daniel would nod politely. "Yes, sir. But I'm also working on my own project on the side." "A project?" Victoria would interrupt with a laugh. "Sarah, your husband has been working on his project for 3 years now. When is this magical project going to make you rich?" The whole family would laugh. Everyone except Sarah. "Leave him alone," Sarah would say quietly, looking down at her plate. But deep down, even Sarah was starting to have doubts. Years passed. Daniel kept working on his project. But nothing changed. They still lived in the small apartment. They still had very little money. Sarah still had to ask her parents for help when the rent was due. And her family kept mocking Daniel. "He's a dreamer," her mother Linda would say when Daniel wasn't around. "Dreamers never succeed, Sarah. You married a loser." "He's not a loser," Sarah would defend him. But her voice was getting weaker each time. Marcus, her younger brother, would shake his head sadly. "Sarah, you could have married anyone. A doctor, a lawyer, someone from a good family. But you chose him." Even her friends started saying things. "Sarah, honey," her best friend Rachel said one day over coffee. "You're young. You're beautiful. You could start over. Find someone who can actually take care of you." The words planted seeds of doubt in Sarah's mind. Small seeds at first, but they grew bigger and bigger. One night, Sarah came home from a terrible day at work. She was tired and frustrated. When she walked into the apartment, she saw Daniel at his desk again, typing away on his computer, surrounded by empty coffee cups and messy papers. "Daniel," Sarah said tiredly, "can we talk?" "Sure, babe," Daniel said without looking up. "Just give me 5 minutes. I'm almost done with this code." "You're always almost done," Sarah snapped suddenly. "You've been saying that for years." Daniel stopped typing. He turned around slowly, surprise on his face. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "What's wrong?" Sarah's voice was rising now. "What's wrong is that we're broke, Daniel. We can barely pay rent. My family thinks you're a joke. I'm tired of waiting for this stupid project that's never going to work." Daniel stood up quickly, his face hurt. "Sarah, please. I know it's been hard, but I'm so close. I promise you." "You always promise," Sarah shouted, tears filling her eyes. "But nothing ever changes. I can't do this anymore, Daniel. I can't keep living like this." The apartment went very quiet. Daniel stared at her, his brown eyes filled with pain. "What are you saying?" Sarah took a deep breath. The words felt like knives coming out of her mouth. "I want a divorce." The divorce happened quickly. Too quickly. Daniel didn't fight it. He signed the papers without arguing. He packed his things and moved out of the apartment in one day. "I'm sorry I couldn't give you the life you wanted," Daniel said quietly as he stood at the door with his suitcase. "I really am." Sarah didn't cry. She told herself she was doing the right thing. She was choosing a better future. "Goodbye, Daniel," she said coldly. Daniel looked at her one last time. There was something in his eyes. Something Sarah couldn't quite understand. It wasn't anger. It was sadness? Disappointment? "Goodbye, Sarah," he said softly. Then he walked out the door, and Sarah never saw him again. For 5 years. After the divorce, Sarah's life got better. At least that's what everyone told her. She moved back in with her parents for a while. She got a good job working at her father's company. She went on dates with rich men her mother set her up with. "See," Victoria would say, "aren't you glad you got rid of that loser?" Now you can actually have a real life. Sarah would smile and nod. But sometimes, late at night, she would think about Daniel. She wondered where he was, what he was doing, if he ever finished his project. She heard through mutual friends that Daniel had moved to another city. That was all she knew. Years passed. Sarah tried to forget him, and slowly she did. Until tonight, the restaurant felt like it was spinning. Sarah stared at Daniel in complete shock. Her brain couldn't process what was happening. This couldn't be real. This had to be a dream, a nightmare. But it wasn't. "Mr. Carter," Richard said happily, still shaking Daniel's hand. "Please sit down. We have so much to discuss." Daniel smiled politely and sat down at the head of the table, right across from Sarah. Everyone at the table was smiling and excited. They had no idea. None of them recognized him. Daniel looked so different now. More confident, more polished, more powerful. Only Sarah knew the truth. "So, Mr. Carter," Linda said sweetly, "tell us about yourself. We've heard you're one of the youngest billionaires in the country." "That's very kind," Daniel said smoothly. "I've been lucky. I started a tech company 5 years ago, and it grew faster than I expected." 5 years ago. Sarah felt like she might throw up. "That's incredible," Marcus said, leaning forward eagerly. "What made you want to buy our company?" Daniel took a sip of water, his eyes briefly glancing at Sarah before looking back at Marcus. "I'm always interested in strong family businesses," Daniel said carefully. "Companies that have been built with hard work and dedication. Companies that value loyalty." The word loyalty seemed to hang in the air. Sarah's hands were shaking under the table. She felt Victoria lean over and whisper, "Are you okay? You look really pale." "I'm fine," Sarah whispered back. But she wasn't fine. She was the opposite of fine. Richard stood up again, raising his glass. "A toast to Mr. Carter and to the bright future of Henderson Industries." Everyone raised their glasses except Sarah. She couldn't move. Daniel raised his glass slowly, his eyes locked on Sarah's. "To the future," he said quietly, "and to old memories." The way he said it sent chills down Sarah's spine. After the toast, everyone started talking excitedly about the business deal. But Sarah couldn't hear any of it. All she could hear was the blood rushing in her ears. She needed to get out of there. She needed to breathe. "Excuse me," Sarah said suddenly, standing up quickly. "I need to use the restroom." She walked away from the table as fast as she could without running. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She pushed through the restaurant doors and into the hallway where the bathrooms were. She leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. This can't be happening, she thought. This can't be real. "Hello, Sarah." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She looked up. Daniel was standing there, just a few feet away, his hands in his pockets. His face was calm, but his eyes were intense. "We need to talk," Daniel said quietly. I don't understand," Sarah stammered, her back pressed against the wall. "How is this possible? You were a loser." Daniel finished for her, his voice neutral. "Isn't that what your family called me?" Sarah's face burned with shame. "Daniel, It's okay," Daniel interrupted, but his voice had an edge to it now. "You don't need to explain. I remember everything very clearly." He took a step closer. Sarah wanted to move away, but her feet wouldn't work. "Do you know what happened after you left me, Sarah?" Daniel asked quietly. "Do you know what I did?" Sarah shook her head, unable to speak. "I finished my project," Daniel said simply. "The project I spent years working on while you slept. The project you called stupid. It was a software program, artificial intelligence for business automation. And 6 months after you divorced me, I sold it to a major tech company for $50 million. Sarah's mouth dropped open. $50 million, Daniel repeated. "That was just the beginning. I used that money to start my own company. Within 3 years, my company was worth over $2 billion. He paused, watching Sarah's face turn even whiter. "And now," Daniel continued, his voice dropping lower, I own the company that your entire family depends on. The hallway seemed to tilt sideways. Why? Sarah finally managed to whisper. Why did you buy our company? For the first time, Daniel's calm expression cracked just a little. A small, cold smile appeared on his face. Because, he said slowly, I never forgot what your family did to me, how they treated me, how they laughed at me, how you gave up on me when I needed you most. Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes. Daniel, please. Don't worry, Daniel said, his voice becoming businesslike again. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for business. But I think it's important that you know exactly who you're dealing with now. He started to walk away, then paused and looked back at her. Oh, and Sarah? Daniel said quietly. Your father doesn't know who I am. None of your family does. And I'd like to keep it that way. For now. Why? Sarah asked, her voice breaking. Daniel's smile turned even colder. Because watching them treat me with respect, the same people who called me worthless, is far more satisfying than any revenge I could plan. With that, he walked back toward the dining room, leaving Sarah alone in the hallway, her whole world crumbling around her. Sarah stood there for what felt like forever, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. What had she done? She had divorced the man who would become a billionaire. She had given up on him just before he succeeded. And now, he owned the company her entire family depended on. And worse, he knew. He remembered everything. Finally, Sarah forced herself to walk back to the table. Her legs felt like jelly, but she made it. When she sat down, everyone was laughing and talking happily. Daniel was smiling and chatting with her father about business deals and investment opportunities. He looked so comfortable, so powerful, so different from the man she had married. Victoria leaned over to Sarah and whispered excitedly, Isn't he amazing? And he's single. Mom already asked. Sarah felt sick. I think I might try to get his number, Victoria continued, giggling. Wouldn't it be funny if I married a billionaire? Sarah wanted to scream. She wanted to tell Victoria everything. But she couldn't. Because if she did, her entire family would know that she had been married to this man. That she had divorced him. That she had given up on him right before he became one of the richest men in the world. They would never forgive her. So Sarah sat there in silence, watching her ex-husband charm her family, knowing that her life was about to get very, very complicated. The dinner finally ended after what felt like 100 years. As everyone was saying goodbye, Richard grabbed Daniel's hand again. Mr. Carter, this has been wonderful. We should have lunch next week to discuss the details of the transition. I'd like that, Daniel said with a professional smile. Actually, I was thinking, since I'll be working closely with your company, it might be good if I got to know your family better. Maybe we could have dinner at your home? I'd love to see how a successful family business operates from the inside. Richard's eyes lit up. That's a wonderful idea. How about this Friday? We'll have a big family dinner. Perfect, Daniel said. His eyes flickered to Sarah for just a moment. I'm looking forward to it. Sarah's stomach dropped. Family dinner. At her parents' house. With Daniel. This was a nightmare. As the family walked out of the restaurant, Victoria grabbed Sarah's arm. Oh my God. Did you see how he looked at you during dinner? Sarah's heart stopped. What? Mr. Carter, Victoria said excitedly. He kept glancing at you. I think he might be interested in you, Sarah. Sarah almost laughed. But it wasn't a funny kind of laugh. It was the kind of laugh that happens right before you start crying. I don't think so, Sarah said weakly. Are you kidding? Victoria said. You should totally try to date him. Can you imagine? A billionaire in the family. Mom and Dad would be so proud. Sarah closed her eyes. If only Victoria knew. If only any of them knew. But they didn't. And Daniel seemed determined to keep it that way. For now. That night, Sarah lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Her mind kept replaying everything. Daniel's cold smile. His words in the hallway. The way he looked at her across the dinner table. What was he planning? Was he really just here for business? Or was there something else? And the worst question of all, the question that kept Sarah awake all night. What would happen when her family found out the truth? Because Sarah knew one thing for certain. Daniel wasn't done yet. This was only the beginning. Sarah woke up the next morning feeling like she hadn't slept at all. Her eyes were red and puffy, her head hurt, and her body felt heavy like someone had put rocks on her chest. She looked at her phone. It was 7:30 a.m. She had 15 missed calls from her mother and 23 text messages in the family group chat. With shaking hands, Sarah opened the messages. Mom. Sarah. Wasn't Mr. Carter wonderful? So polite and handsome. Victoria. I'm already planning what to wear to Friday's dinner. Maybe the red dress. Marcus. This guy is going to make us so rich. Dad says he's investing millions into the company. Dad. Family meeting today at 10 a.m. at the house. Everyone must attend. We need to discuss the future of Henderson Industries. Sarah's stomach twisted into knots. A family meeting. Of course. She dragged herself out of bed and got dressed slowly. Her hands were still shaking as she buttoned her shirt. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the pale, tired woman staring back at her. Get it together, Sarah, she whispered to herself. You can't let them see you like this. But how could she pretend everything was normal? How could she sit in a room with her family and talk about Daniel like he was a stranger when he used to be her husband? When he used to hold her hand and tell her he loved her? Sarah took a deep breath and grabbed her car keys. She had no choice. She had to go. The Henderson family house looked even bigger and more beautiful in the morning sunlight. The fountain in the front yard sparkled, and the perfectly cut grass seemed to glow green. Sarah parked her car and sat there for a moment, trying to gather her courage. You can do this, she told herself. Just act normal. Don't let them see that anything is wrong. She walked up to the front door and rang the bell. Her younger brother Marcus opened it with a huge grin on his face. Sarah. Finally. Everyone's waiting for you, Marcus said excitedly. He was wearing an expensive suit like he was going to a party instead of a family meeting. Sarah forced a smile and walked inside. The whole family was gathered in the big living room. Her father sat in his favorite leather chair, looking very serious and important. Her mother sat on the couch, already sipping tea from a fancy cup. Victoria was checking her makeup in a small mirror as usual. Sarah, dear, come sit down, her mother Linda said, patting the spot next to her on the couch. Sarah sat down carefully, her hands folded in her lap. Richard cleared his throat loudly. Good. Now that everyone is here, we can begin. He stood up and walked to the center of the room like he was giving a big speech. As you all know, Richard began, yesterday we met Mr. Daniel Carter, the man who has purchased our company. This is the biggest moment in Henderson Industries history. This man is worth over $2 billion, and he's chosen US to invest in. Everyone nodded seriously, hanging on every word. But this is also a delicate situation, Richard continued. We need to make sure Mr. Carter is happy. We need to show him that the Henderson family is professional, trustworthy, and worthy of his investment. What does that mean, Dad? Marcus asked. Richard's face became very serious. It means that for the next few months, we all need to be on our best behavior. We need to impress Mr. Carter at every opportunity. We need to make him feel welcome in our family. That won't be hard, Victoria said with a dreamy smile. He's so charming and handsome. I don't think I've ever met anyone like him. Sarah felt her stomach twist again. She wanted to scream. That's because you have met him before. He used to come to this house every Sunday for dinner. You used to make fun of him, but she stayed silent. There's something else, Linda said, setting down her teacup. I spoke with Mr. Carter's assistant this morning. Mr. Carter has requested something unusual. Everyone leaned forward, curious. He wants to spend time with our family, Linda explained. Not just business meetings. He wants to attend family dinners, family events, maybe even casual outings. He said he's interested in understanding family dynamics because he's thinking about starting his own family someday. Sarah's heart nearly stopped. What was Daniel planning? That's perfect, Victoria said excitedly. That means we'll get to see him more often. Exactly, Richard said with a satisfied smile. This is an incredible opportunity. If we can make Mr. Carter feel like part of our family, he might invest even more money into the company. Maybe even make some of you executives or partners. Marcus's eyes went wide. Really? Absolutely, Richard said. So here's what I'm asking from all of you. Be friendly, be welcoming, be the best versions of yourselves. His eyes moved around the room, landing on each family member. When his eyes reached Sarah, they stayed there a little longer. Sarah, Richard said carefully, I noticed you were very quiet at dinner last night. Is everything okay? Everyone turned to look at her. Sarah felt like she was under a spotlight. I'm fine, Sarah said quickly. Just tired from work. Well, make sure you get some rest, Richard said seriously. Because on Friday we're having Mr. Carter over for dinner, and I want everyone to be alert, engaging, and impressive. Understood. Understood, everyone said together. Everyone except Sarah. She just nodded weakly. After the meeting ended, Victoria pulled Sarah aside into the hallway. Sarah, can we talk? Victoria said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Sure, Sarah said quietly. Victoria looked around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned in close and whispered, I'm going to try to date Mr. Carter. Sarah felt like someone had punched her in the chest. What? I know, Victoria said, giggling. It sounds crazy, but think about it. He's single, he's rich, he's gorgeous, and he's going to be around our family a lot. This is the perfect opportunity. Victoria, that's not a good idea, Sarah started to say. Why not? Victoria interrupted. Are you interested in him? No, Sarah said too quickly. I don't think you should mix business with personal stuff. What if it makes things weird? Victoria waved her hand dismissively. It won't be weird. It'll be romantic. Can you imagine me as Mrs. Carter? Living in a mansion, traveling the world, wearing designer clothes every day. Sarah wanted to grab her sister by the shoulders and shake her. She wanted to yell, he was my husband. I was Mrs. Carter. And I threw it all away. But she couldn't. Just be careful, Sarah said weakly. Don't worry, Victoria said with a confident smile. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to look absolutely stunning on Friday. And if I'm lucky, by the end of the night, Mr. Carter will be asking for my phone number. She walked away, humming happily to herself. Sarah stood in the hallway, feeling like her world was falling apart piece by piece. That afternoon, Sarah went back to her apartment, the same small apartment she and Daniel had lived in years ago. After the divorce, she couldn't afford anything better, so she had stayed there. Sometimes, late at night, she would look around the apartment and remember the good times. Daniel cooking dinner in the tiny kitchen. Daniel laughing at a movie on their old couch. Daniel kissing her goodnight before going to work on his project. She tried not to think about those memories, but they were always there like ghosts. Sarah had just changed into comfortable clothes when there was a knock at her door. She wasn't expecting anyone. Carefully, she walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Her blood turned to ice. Daniel was standing outside her door. Sarah's mind raced. What was he doing here? How did he know where she lived? What did he want? Another knock. Louder this time. Sarah. Daniel's voice came through the door. I know you're in there. We need to talk. Sarah's hands shook as she slowly opened the door. Just a crack. Daniel stood there in casual clothes, jeans, and a simple black shirt. He looked less like a billionaire and more like the old Daniel. The Daniel she used to know. How did you find my address? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm a billionaire, Sarah, Daniel said simply. Finding an address isn't difficult. He wasn't smiling. He looked serious, tired even. Can I come in? Daniel asked. Please, just for a few minutes. Every instinct told Sarah to say no, to close the door and pretend this wasn't happening. But something in Daniel's eyes made her pause. He didn't look angry. He looked sad. Slowly, Sarah opened the door wider and stepped aside. Daniel walked into the apartment and stopped in the middle of the living room. He looked around slowly, his eyes taking in every detail. "You still live here," he said quietly. "In our old apartment. I couldn't afford anything else after." Sarah's voice trailed off. "After you divorced me," Daniel finished. He wasn't being mean. He was just stating a fact. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. "Why are you here, Daniel?" Sarah finally asked. Daniel turned to face her. "To talk. Without your family around. Without the pretending." He walked over to the old couch, the same couch they used to sit on together, and sat down. He looked at Sarah and gestured to the seat across from him. Sarah sat down carefully, her heart pounding. "I need you to understand something," Daniel began. "I didn't buy your family's company to hurt you." "Then why did you buy it?" Sarah asked. Daniel was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "After you left me," he said slowly, "I was destroyed. I loved you, Sarah. I really did. And when you gave up on me, when you walked away right before everything I'd worked for finally succeeded, it broke something inside me." Sarah felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "For a long time I was angry," Daniel continued. "I wanted revenge. I wanted to make you and your family pay for how you treated me. So yes, when I saw that Henderson Industries was up for sale, I bought it. I won't lie about that." "So you are here for revenge," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "I was," Daniel corrected. "But then something strange happened." "What?" Daniel leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Last night, when I saw you at that restaurant, when I saw the look on your face, I realized something. You're not happy, Sarah. You haven't been happy for a long time." Sarah looked away, unable to meet his eyes. He was right. She hadn't been happy. Not really. Not since the divorce. "And your family," Daniel continued, "they don't even recognize me. They treat me with respect now because I have money. But 5 years ago, they treated me like garbage. They're fake, Sarah. All of them. They're still my family," Sarah said defensively, even though she knew he was right. "I know," Daniel said softly, "and that's why I'm here. To give you a choice." Sarah looked up at him, confused. "What choice?" Daniel took a deep breath. "Your family doesn't know who I am, and I could keep it that way. I could pretend to be a stranger. I could invest in their company, make them rich, and walk away. They would never have to know about our past." "Why would you do that?" Sarah asked. "Because despite everything," Daniel said quietly, "I don't want to hurt you, Sarah. I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. But you were my wife. I loved you once. And I can't completely erase that." Tears were now rolling down Sarah's cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. I'm so sorry. I was stupid. I was weak. I gave up on you when I should have believed in you." "I know," Daniel said. His voice wasn't angry, just tired. "But I need you to understand something. I can't forget what happened. I can't just forgive you and move on like nothing happened. Too much has changed." "So what happens now?" Sarah asked through her tears. Daniel stood up and walked toward the door. He paused with his hand on the doorknob and turned back to her. "Now," he said slowly, "you have to decide. Do you tell your family the truth about who I am? Or do you keep my secret? What do you want me to do?" Sarah asked desperately. Daniel smiled sadly. "That's not my decision to make, Sarah. It's yours. But whatever you choose, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Sarah asked, fear creeping into her voice. "If you tell them," Daniel said, "your family will know that you divorced a billionaire. They'll know you gave up on me. They'll know you made the biggest mistake of your life. Can you handle that?" Sarah's face went pale. "But if you don't tell them," Daniel continued, "you'll have to watch me become part of your family. You'll have to sit at dinner tables and smile while your sister tries to date me. While your parents treat me like a hero. While I become everything they wanted you to marry. Can you handle that?" Sarah couldn't speak. Both options were terrible. Daniel opened the door and stepped into the hallway. "You have until Friday's dinner to decide," he said. "Think carefully, Sarah, because after Friday, everything changes. And with that, he was gone. Sarah spent the rest of that day and all of the next day thinking. She barely ate. She barely slept. Her mind was spinning with possibilities and fears. Should she tell her family? Should she keep the secret? Both choices felt like jumping off a cliff. Either way, she would get hurt. On Wednesday morning, Sarah got a phone call from Marcus. "Hey sis," Marcus said cheerfully. "Mom wants you to come over for lunch. She's planning the menu for Friday's dinner and wants your opinion." "Okay," Sarah said tiredly. "I'll be there." When Sarah arrived at the family house, she found her mother in the kitchen, surrounded by cookbooks and recipe cards. "Sarah, darling," Linda said happily, "come help me decide. Should we serve roasted duck or prime rib for the main course?" "Either one sounds fine, Mom," Sarah said, sitting down at the kitchen table. "Oh, don't be boring," Linda said, waving her hand. "This dinner needs to be perfect. Mr. Carter is a very important man. We need to impress him." Sarah bit her lip. If only her mother knew. Just then, Victoria burst into the kitchen, holding her phone excitedly. "You guys won't believe what I found," Victoria said, her eyes wide. Sarah's heart stopped. "What did you find?" "I was doing research on Mr. Carter, just to learn more about him," Victoria explained. "And I found some old articles about his company. But there's something weird." "What's weird?" Linda asked, curious. "There are no photos of him from before 5 years ago," Victoria said. "It's like he didn't exist before he became rich. Don't you think that's strange?" Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. "Maybe he just valued his privacy," Linda suggested. "Maybe," Victoria said, but she didn't look convinced. "But I also found something else. Someone on a business forum mentioned that Mr. Carter used to live in this city before he became successful." Sarah's hands started shaking under the table. "Really?" Linda said, very interested now. "Did it say where in the city?" "No," Victoria said, scrolling through her phone. "But it did say he was married once. And then he got divorced. Right before he became successful." The kitchen went very quiet. Sarah felt like the walls were closing in on her. "Divorced?" Linda said with surprise. "Mr. Carter was married?" "Apparently," Victoria said. "But there are no details. No name of the ex-wife. Nothing. It's like someone erased all the information." "How interesting," Linda said thoughtfully. "A mysterious past. That just makes him even more intriguing." "I know, right?" Victoria agreed. "I wonder what happened. Why did his wife leave him?" "Maybe she was stupid," Marcus said, walking into the kitchen and grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "Imagine divorcing someone right before they become a billionaire. What an idiot." Everyone laughed. Everyone except Sarah. She felt like she was going to be sick. "Are you okay, Sarah?" her mother asked, noticing Sarah's pale face. "You look like you're about to faint." I need some air," Sarah said quickly, standing up. "I'll be right back." She rushed out of the kitchen and onto the back patio, gulping deep breaths of fresh air. This was getting worse. Victoria was investigating Daniel's past. What if she found out the truth? What if she discovered that Sarah was Daniel's ex-wife? Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking hands and typed a message to Daniel's number. She'd found it in her old contacts, still saved after all these years. "Sarah, we need to talk. Victoria is investigating your past." She waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Finally, her phone buzzed. "Daniel, I know. Let her investigate. She won't find anything I don't want her to find." "Sarah." "Daniel, this is getting too complicated. Maybe you should just tell them the truth." "This is crazy. Daniel. You had your chance to tell them the truth 5 years ago. Now we play by my rules. See you Friday, Sarah." Sarah stared at her phone, feeling completely helpless. Thursday arrived. The day before the big dinner. The Henderson family house was in complete chaos. Linda had hired extra staff to clean every corner of the house. Richard was having his expensive wine collection brought up from the cellar. Marcus was practicing talking points about business. And Victoria was at the salon, getting her hair and nails done. Sarah tried to stay out of the way, but her mother kept pulling her into different rooms, asking her opinion on table settings and flower arrangements. Sarah, should we use the gold plates or the silver plates? Linda asked, holding up two different sets. I don't care, Mom, Sarah said tiredly. Well, you should care, Linda said, looking annoyed. This dinner could change our family's future. If we impress Mr. Carter enough, he might make you the vice president of the company. Don't you want that? Sarah wanted to laugh. Vice president of the company. Working for her ex-husband. The universe really had a terrible sense of humor. Sure, Mom, Sarah said quietly. Whatever you think is best. That evening, Sarah was alone in one of the guest bedrooms when her phone rang. It was Rachel, her best friend. Sarah, I've been trying to reach you for days, Rachel said when Sarah answered. Where have you been? Just busy with family stuff, Sarah said. Well, I have news, Rachel said excitedly. Do you remember that tech billionaire I told you about? The one who bought your family's company. Sarah's stomach dropped. Yeah, I saw his picture in a business magazine today, Rachel continued. And Sarah, he looks so familiar. I swear I've seen him somewhere before. Sarah's heart was pounding. Really? Where? I can't remember, Rachel said, frustrated. It's driving me crazy. I feel like I knew him from somewhere. Maybe from college? Or wait, didn't you used to date someone who worked in tech? What was his name? David? Derek? Daniel? Sarah whispered. Daniel. Yes, Rachel said. Whatever happened to him? You guys were so cute together. Sarah closed her eyes. She couldn't do this anymore. She needed to tell someone. She needed to share this terrible secret with someone before it destroyed her. Rachel, Sarah said slowly, can you keep a secret? A really, really big secret. Of course, Rachel said, her voice becoming serious. What's wrong? Sarah took a deep breath. The billionaire who bought my family's company, Sarah said quietly. His name is Daniel Carter. He's my ex-husband. There was complete silence on the other end of the phone. Rachel, Sarah said nervously. Are you still there? What? Rachel's voice exploded through the phone so loudly that Sarah had to pull it away from her ear. Are you serious? Daniel? You're Daniel? The guy you divorced 5 years ago? Yes, Sarah said miserably. Oh my God. Rachel breathed. Oh my God, Sarah. You divorced a billionaire. You wait. Does your family know? No, Sarah admitted. Daniel looks different now. More confident. More polished. And it's been 5 years. They don't recognize him. This is insane, Rachel said. What are you going to do? I don't know, Sarah said, her voice breaking. Daniel gave me a choice. I can either tell my family the truth or keep his secret. But both options are terrible. What does Daniel want? Rachel asked. I don't know, Sarah said honestly. Sometimes he seems like he wants revenge. But other times, he seems like he just wants them to see what they missed. What they could have had if they'd treated him better. Rachel was quiet for a moment, thinking. Sarah, she finally said, I love you. You're my best friend. But you really messed up 5 years ago. I know, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. And now, Rachel continued, you have to face the consequences. Whatever Daniel is planning, whatever happens with your family, you kind of deserve it. The words hurt because they were true. But, Rachel added more gently, I'm here for you, whatever you need. Okay? Okay, Sarah said, wiping her tears. Thank you. After hanging up, Sarah lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow was Friday. Tomorrow was the dinner. Tomorrow everything would change. And Sarah still didn't know what she was going to do. Sarah woke up early on Friday morning after another restless night. Her stomach was in knots. Her head was pounding. She felt like she was walking toward the edge of a cliff and couldn't stop. Her phone buzzed with messages from the family group chat. Mom, today is the big day. Everyone be at the house by 5 p.m. sharp. Victoria. I got the most beautiful dress. Mr. Carter won't be able to take his eyes off me. Marcus, Dad gave me a list of business topics to discuss. I'm ready to impress. Dad, remember, best behavior, everyone. This dinner is crucial for our future. Sarah wanted to throw her phone across the room. Instead, she got dressed slowly, putting on a simple black dress. The same dress she'd worn to a business party years ago when she and Daniel were still married. He had told her she looked beautiful in it. Why was she wearing this dress? Sarah didn't know. Maybe it was a reminder. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was just her being sentimental. At 4:30 p.m., Sarah drove to her parents' house. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the steering wheel. When she arrived, the house looked like something out of a magazine. Flowers everywhere, candles lit, the dining table set with the finest china and crystal glasses. Everything was perfect, too perfect. Sarah, finally! Her mother called out, rushing over. Go help your sister with the appetizers. And for heaven's sake, put on some makeup. You look exhausted. Sarah went to the kitchen where Victoria was arranging cheese and crackers on fancy plates. Hey Sarah, Victoria said with a huge smile. Can you believe tonight is finally here? I'm so nervous and excited. I practiced what I'm going to say to Mr. Carter at least 20 times. Victoria, Sarah said carefully, what if Mr. Carter isn't interested in dating anyone? What if he's just here for business? Victoria laughed. Then I'll make him interested. Trust me, Sarah. By the end of tonight, Daniel Carter is going to be completely charmed by me. Sarah flinched when she heard Victoria say Daniel's full name so casually. The doorbell rang. Everyone in the house froze. He's here, Linda whispered urgently. Everyone, positions. Look natural. The family quickly rushed to the living room and arranged themselves in casual poses that were clearly not casual at all. Richard walked to the front door, straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and opened it. There stood Daniel Carter, looking absolutely perfect in a navy blue suit. He held a bottle of expensive wine in one hand and a bouquet of flowers in the other. Mr. Carter, welcome, Richard said warmly, shaking Daniel's hand. Please call me Daniel, Daniel said with a charming smile. We're going to be working together closely. No need for formalities. He walked into the house, and everyone greeted him warmly. Everyone except Sarah, who stood frozen in the corner, watching. Daniel's eyes found hers across the room. For just a moment, his smile faltered. Just for a second. Then it was back, bright and confident. These are for you, Mrs. Henderson, Daniel said, handing the flowers to Linda. Oh, how thoughtful, Linda said, delighted. Sarah, put these in water, would you? Sarah numbly took the flowers and walked to the kitchen. Her hands were shaking so badly that she almost dropped the vase. She was arranging the flowers when she heard footsteps behind her. Need any help? Sarah spun around. Daniel was standing in the kitchen doorway, his hands in his pockets, watching her with an unreadable expression. What are you doing? Sarah whispered urgently. Someone could see us. Relax, Daniel said calmly. I told your father I needed to use the restroom. We have about 2 minutes. He walked closer to her, so close that Sarah could smell his cologne. A different scent than he used to wear, but somehow it suited him. You're wearing that dress? Daniel said quietly, his eyes scanning her face. I remember that dress. Daniel, Sarah started to say. Have you made your decision? Daniel interrupted. Are you going to tell them? Or are you going to keep my secret? Sarah looked into his eyes she used to know so well. Eyes that used to look at her with love. Now they looked at her with something else. Something she couldn't quite identify. I don't know yet, Sarah admitted. Daniel nodded slowly. Then I guess we'll see what happens tonight. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. By the way, he said without turning around, your sister is planning to try to seduce me tonight. Should I let her? Sarah's blood ran cold. What? I'm just curious, Daniel said, finally looking back at her. If I started dating your sister, If I became part of your family in that way, how would that make you feel? Sarah couldn't speak. The thought of Daniel and Victoria together made her want to scream. Daniel smiled, that same cold, calculating smile from the restaurant. That's what I thought, he said softly. And then he walked out of the kitchen, leaving Sarah alone with her heart pounding and her mind racing. Everyone gathered around the massive dining table. Richard sat at one end. Daniel sat at the other end, the guest of honor. Linda sat to Daniel's right. Victoria made sure to sit to his left, smiling sweetly at him. Sarah sat in the middle of the table directly across from Daniel. She couldn't escape his gaze even if she tried. "Let us say grace," Richard announced. Everyone bowed their heads. Everyone except Sarah and Daniel. Their eyes met across the table, locked in a silent battle. After the prayer, the dinner began. The food was incredible. Roasted duck with orange sauce, garlic mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables, fresh bread, and expensive wine. But Sarah couldn't taste any of it. Everything felt like cardboard in her mouth. "So, Daniel," Richard said jovially, using his first name as requested, "tell us about your family. Where did you grow up?" Daniel smiled politely. "I grew up in a small town about 3 hours from here. My parents weren't wealthy, but they worked hard. My father was a mechanic. My mother was a school teacher." "Humble beginnings," Richard said, nodding approvingly. "I respect that. It takes true character to rise from nothing to become what you are today." Sarah almost choked on her wine. Her father had never respected Daniel's humble beginnings when he was married to Sarah. He had looked down on Daniel's family and called them simple people. "What about relationships?" Victoria asked, batting her eyelashes. "I read that you were married once. If you don't mind me asking, what happened?" The entire table went quiet. Everyone leaned forward, curious. Daniel's eyes flickered to Sarah for just a fraction of a second. Then he looked back at Victoria. "It's true," Daniel said calmly. "I was married years ago, before I became successful." "What was she like?" Victoria asked. "Your ex-wife." Sarah felt like she was going to faint. She gripped her wine glass so tightly her knuckles turned white. "She was..." Daniel paused, choosing his words carefully. "She was beautiful, kind, intelligent. I loved her very much." "So what went wrong?" Marcus asked. Daniel took a sip of his wine, his face neutral. "She didn't believe in me," Daniel said simply. "I was working on building my company, working day and night to make something of myself. But she got tired of waiting. She wanted stability, security, things I couldn't give her at the time. So she left." The table was completely silent. You could hear a pin drop. "Right before I became successful," Daniel continued, his voice steady but with an edge to it. "Right before everything I'd worked for finally paid off. She gave up on me." "That's terrible," Linda said, shaking her head. "What a foolish woman. To leave you right before you became successful. She must regret it every day." Daniel's eyes locked onto Sarah's. "I imagine she does," he said quietly. Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to be anywhere but here. "Well, her loss is someone else's gain," Victoria said flirtatiously, placing her hand on Daniel's arm. "Any woman would be lucky to be with you now." Daniel smiled at Victoria, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's very kind of you to say," he said politely, gently removing his arm from her touch. The dinner continued. More courses came out. More wine was poured. The family asked Daniel questions about his business, his investments, his plans for the future. Daniel answered everything smoothly, confidently, charmingly. He was playing them perfectly, and they had no idea. Dessert was being served, chocolate lava cake with vanilla ice cream, when Marcus brought up something that made Sarah's blood turn to ice. "Daniel," Marcus said casually, "I've been thinking, if you used to live in this city, maybe we knew some of the same people. What area did you live in?" Daniel's smile didn't waver. "The east side, near the university." Sarah's breath caught. "That's where their old apartment was." "Really?" Victoria said with interest. Sarah used to live over there too, in that little apartment complex on Riverside Drive. Remember, Sarah? Everyone turned to look at Sarah. Yes, Sarah managed to say. What a coincidence, Linda said. When did you live there, Daniel? About 5 to 6 years ago, Daniel said calmly. Sarah was there around the same time, Marcus said, laughing. Small world. Maybe you guys crossed paths without knowing it. Sarah felt like the room was spinning. Maybe, Daniel said, his eyes boring into Sarah's. The world is smaller than we think. And then, the moment Sarah had been dreading arrived. Richard stood up, tapping his wine glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. Before we finish this wonderful dinner, Richard announced, I want to make a toast. Daniel, in just a few short weeks, you've become more than a business partner. You've become a friend. Someone we trust. Someone we admire. Everyone raised their glasses. To Daniel Carter, Richard said proudly, a man who represents everything we value. Hard work, intelligence, and success. Everyone clinked glasses and drank. Everyone except Sarah, who finally couldn't take it anymore. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Sarah? Her mother said with concern. What's wrong? Sarah looked around the table at her family. Her father with his proud smile, her mother with her approving nod, Victoria with her flirtatious eyes, Marcus with his eager expression. Then she looked at Daniel, who sat calmly at the head of the table, watching her with those unreadable eyes. And Sarah realized something. She couldn't do this anymore. She couldn't sit here and watch her family celebrate the man they had destroyed 5 years ago. She couldn't watch them treat him like a hero when they had treated him like dirt. She couldn't watch Victoria try to seduce her ex-husband. She couldn't keep this secret any longer. I have something to say, Sarah said, her voice shaking but loud. Sarah, dear, can it wait? Linda said nervously. We're in the middle of... No, Sarah interrupted. It can't wait. She turned to face Daniel directly. You want me to tell them? Sarah said, tears streaming down her face now. Fine, I'll tell them. Daniel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise? Fear? Satisfaction? Sarah couldn't tell. Tell us what? Richard asked, confused and starting to look annoyed. Sarah, what is going on? Sarah took a deep, shaky breath. Daniel Carter, she said slowly, looking right at him, isn't a stranger. The room went completely still. What do you mean? Victoria asked nervously. Sarah's voice grew stronger, even as tears continued to fall. 5 years ago, I was married. My husband worked day and night on a project that I thought was a waste of time. My family, she gestured around the table, told me he was a loser, that he would never succeed, that I should leave him and find someone better. The faces around the table started to show recognition, horror, understanding. No, Linda whispered. Sarah, you're not saying. Daniel Carter, Sarah said clearly, is my ex-husband, the man I divorced 5 years ago, the man you all mocked and called worthless, the loser who ate at this table every Sunday while you made jokes about his cheap clothes and old car. Complete and total silence. Victoria's face went white as a ghost. Marcus dropped his fork with a loud clatter. Linda covered her mouth with both hands. Richard stood frozen, his face turning red. Daniel sat completely still, his expression neutral, watching the chaos unfold. Sarah, Richard finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. Is this true? Before Sarah could answer, Daniel spoke for the first time since her revelation. Yes, he said simply. It's true. The silence in the dining room was deafening. Felt like the entire world had stopped spinning. Richard Henderson stood at the head of the table, his face cycling through different shades of red and purple. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. Linda sat frozen with her hands still covering her mouth, staring at Daniel like she was seeing a ghost. Victoria looked like she might throw up. Her carefully applied makeup was starting to run as tears formed in her eyes. Marcus just kept looking back and forth between Sarah and Daniel, his mouth hanging open in shock. And Daniel sat calmly in his chair, slowly swirling the wine in his glass, completely composed. "Say something," Sarah whispered, looking at her family. "Please, somebody say something." Richard was the first to speak. His voice came out low and dangerous. "You," he said, pointing a shaking finger at Daniel. "You did this on purpose." Daniel took a sip of his wine before responding. "Did what on purpose, Mr. Henderson? Don't play games with me." Richard's voice exploded through the room. "You bought my company knowing exactly who we were. You came into my home under false pretenses. You tricked us." "Did I?" Daniel asked calmly, setting down his wine glass. "I never lied about who I was. I told you my name. I told you about my business. I answered every question you asked me honestly. You let us think you were a stranger." Linda cried out, her voice shrill. "No," Daniel corrected, his voice still eerily calm. "You assumed I was a stranger. There's a difference." Victoria suddenly stood up, her chair falling backward with a crash. "I tried to... Oh my God. I tried to flirt with you. I said all those things about you being handsome and charming. You're my sister's ex-husband." "Yes," Daniel said simply. "I noticed." "This is sick," Victoria shouted. "This is twisted. What kind of person does this?" For the first time, Daniel's calm expression cracked. His eyes went cold, and when he spoke, his voice was hard as steel. "What kind of person?" Daniel repeated slowly, standing up from his chair. "I'll tell you what kind of person. A person who was humiliated in this very house for years. A person who was called worthless, stupid, and a waste of space. A person who was told he would never amount to anything." He looked around the table at each family member. "Do you remember?" Daniel asked. "Because I remember. I remember every single comment, every laugh at my expense, every time you made Sarah feel ashamed for being married to me." Richard's face was now completely red. "You were a nobody. You had nothing. What were we supposed to think? You were supposed to think that a man working hard to build something deserved respect." Daniel's voice rose for the first time. "You were supposed to support your daughter's marriage instead of tearing it apart." He turned to look at Sarah, who was crying silently. "But you didn't," Daniel continued, his voice dropping back to that dangerous calm. "You poisoned her mind against me, day after day, week after week, until she believed the only way to have a good life was to leave me. Don't you dare blame us for her decision," Linda said angrily. "Sarah chose to divorce you. After years of pressure from all of you," Sarah suddenly shouted through her tears. "Don't act innocent. You told me over and over that I was wasting my life, that Daniel would never succeed, that I deserved better. You did deserve better," Richard roared. "Look at you. You've been struggling for 5 years, living in that tiny apartment, working a basic job. If you'd married someone from a good family like we wanted, you'd be living in luxury right now. Instead," Marcus said bitterly, finally finding his voice, "she divorced a billionaire. Do you have any idea what you cost this family, Sarah?" Sarah stared at her brother in disbelief. "Cost this family? Is that all you care about? Money?" "Yes," Marcus shouted. "Yes, Sarah, because unlike you, some of us actually care about our family's future. If you'd stayed married to him, we'd be set for life right now. But you had to give up and ruin everything. That's enough." Daniel's voice cut through the argument like a knife. Everyone stopped and turned to look at him. Daniel's face was no longer calm. It was filled with controlled rage. "Let me make something very clear," Daniel said, his voice low and dangerous. "Sarah didn't cost you anything. You cost yourselves. Your greed, your arrogance, your complete lack of character. That's what cost you." He walked slowly around the table, his hands in his pockets. "For 5 years, I've been watching your family from afar," Daniel continued. "I've seen your business decisions. I've seen how you treat your employees. I've seen how you value money over people, status over integrity." "How dare you?" Richard started to say. I'm not finished, Daniel interrupted coldly. When I heard Henderson Industries was struggling and looking for a buyer, I saw an opportunity. Not for revenge, though I won't lie, that was part of it. But for something bigger. He stopped walking and faced the family. I wanted to see if you had changed, Daniel said. I wanted to see if 5 years had taught you anything about respect, about humility, about treating people with dignity regardless of their bank account. He shook his head slowly. But you haven't changed at all. Tonight, at this dinner, you treated me exactly the same way you did 5 years ago. Except now you kiss up to me instead of putting me down. Same shallow behavior, just a different mask. The truth of his words hung heavy in the air. So what now? Richard asked, his voice tight. You own my company. You have all the power. What are you going to do? Destroy us? Take everything we have? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. James, he said when someone answered. Execute option B. Yes, all of it. Tonight. He hung up and looked at Richard. I'm selling Henderson Industries, Daniel said simply. Richard's face went pale. What? I'm selling it, Daniel repeated. To the Matsuda Corporation. They made an offer last week. I'm accepting it. You can't do that, Marcus shouted. We have a contract. We have. You have nothing, Daniel interrupted. Read the fine print of the contract your father signed. I have complete control over the company's future, and I choose to sell it. The Matsuda Corporation will gut the company, Richard said desperately. They'll fire half the employees. They'll strip it for parts. Everything I built. Everything you built? Daniel asked incredulously. You inherited this company from your father. You've been coasting on his hard work for decades. And now you're going to learn what it feels like to lose everything you took for granted. Linda started crying. Real desperate tears. Please, she begged. Please don't do this. We'll apologize. We'll make it right. It's too late for apologies, Daniel said. 5 years too late. Victoria suddenly rushed forward and grabbed Daniel's arm. Wait, please. What about Sarah? She apologized. She admitted she was wrong. You're not just punishing us. You're punishing her too. Daniel looked down at Victoria's hand on his arm, then slowly moved his eyes to Sarah. Sarah stood there, tears streaming down her face, looking more broken than Daniel had ever seen her. You're right, Daniel said quietly. I am punishing Sarah too. He walked over to Sarah until he was standing right in front of her. Do you know why I really came here tonight? Daniel asked her softly. Why I agreed to this dinner? Sarah shook her head, unable to speak. I wanted to see if you would tell the truth, Daniel said. I wanted to see if you had the courage to stand up to your family and admit what really happened. I wanted to see if you had changed. He reached up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. And you did, Daniel said. You told the truth, even though you knew it would destroy everything, even though you knew your family would hate you for it. You chose honesty over comfort. Sarah's eyes widened. Daniel, that's more than they've ever done, Daniel said, gesturing to her family. They're still only sorry because they got caught. They're still only thinking about money. But you actually felt remorse. Real remorse. He stepped back and looked at the whole family. The sale of Henderson Industries goes through, Daniel said firmly. That doesn't change. But I'm making one adjustment to the deal. What adjustment? Richard asked suspiciously. Daniel pulled out another phone. He seemed to have several and pulled up a document. Sarah Henderson, he read aloud, will receive a one-time payment of $10 million as part of the company sale. Consider it a severance package. The room erupted. What? Victoria screamed. You're giving her $10 million. After what she did to you. That's outrageous, Marcus shouted. She doesn't deserve that money. She doesn't deserve it? Daniel asked coldly. Neither do any of you. At least Sarah had the guts to admit the truth. That's worth something. Richard was shaking with rage. I won't allow this. I'll fight this. I'll take you to court. Go ahead, Daniel said calmly. I have an entire legal team that would love the challenge. And while you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on lawyers, I'll be doing what I do best, winning. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. This dinner is over, Daniel announced. Thank you for the food. It was actually quite good. Give my compliments to the chef. He started walking toward the door. Wait, Sarah called out. Daniel, please wait. Daniel stopped but didn't turn around. What happens now? Sarah asked desperately. With us. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he slowly turned to face her. There is no us, Sarah, he said gently but firmly. There hasn't been for 5 years. But what if I want there to be? Sarah asked, her voice breaking. What if I want to fix this? What if I want another chance? The entire room held its breath. Daniel looked at Sarah, really looked at her. For a moment, his hard expression softened. Just a little. Do you know what the hardest part of all this was? Daniel asked quietly. It wasn't losing the money. It wasn't living in a tiny apartment. It wasn't working 18-hour days. He took a step closer to her. The hardest part, Daniel continued, was knowing that the person I loved most in the world didn't believe in me, didn't trust me, gave up on me when I needed her support the most. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face. I know, and I'm so sorry. I believe you, Daniel said softly. I really do. But Sarah, some things can't be fixed. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. So that's it, Sarah whispered. After everything, you're just going to walk away? Daniel smiled sadly. You walked away first. Remember. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. He held it out to Sarah. My personal assistant's number is on this card, Daniel said. Call her on Monday. She'll help you set up the transfer of your $10 million. Use it wisely. Build a life you're proud of. Be happy. Sarah took the card with shaking hands. Will I ever see you again? Probably not, Daniel said honestly. I'm moving my headquarters to New York next month. Starting fresh. New city, new projects, new life. What about us? Richard suddenly demanded. What about the company? Our employees? Daniel turned to face Richard one last time. The Matsuda Corporation will take over in 30 days, Daniel said. They're actually quite good at restructuring struggling companies. If you cooperate with them, most of your employees will keep their jobs. If you fight them, they'll clean house. And what about us? Linda asked desperately. The family? That, Daniel said, is not my problem anymore. He walked to the front door and opened it. Then he paused and looked back one final time. You know what's funny? Daniel said. For years, I dreamed about this moment. I imagined having all the power, watching you realize what you'd lost, seeing the regret on your faces. He shook his head. But now that it's here, I just feel tired, and maybe a little sad, because at the end of the day, we all lost something important. You lost your company and your dignity. Sarah lost her marriage and 5 years she can never get back. And I lost my ability to trust people. He looked directly at Sarah. Goodbye, Sarah, Daniel said softly. I hope you find what you're looking for. Daniel, Sarah started to say, reaching out toward him, but he was already gone, walking out the door and into the night. Sarah stood there, frozen, staring at the empty doorway. Behind her, chaos erupted. This is your fault, Victoria screamed at Sarah. You ruined everything. How could you be so stupid? Marcus yelled. You had a billionaire and you threw him away. Both of you, shut up, Richard roared. We need to think. We need to plan. We need to. But Sarah didn't hear any of it. She was already running. She ran out the front door, down the driveway, looking desperately for Daniel's car. She saw taillights disappearing down the street. Daniel! Sarah screamed, running after the car. Daniel, please! But the car didn't stop. It turned the corner and was gone. Sarah stood in the middle of the street, alone, crying, with the business card clutched in her hand. Behind her, through the windows of the house, She could see her family arguing and shouting at each other. And Sarah realized something. She had no one. She had $10 million coming to her. But she had no one. The coffee shop was small and cozy, with brick walls and soft jazz music playing in the background. Sarah sat at a corner table, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater. Her hair was shorter now, she'd cut it last month. A fresh start, the hairdresser had said. She held a cup of coffee in both hands, warming her fingers, and stared out the window at the rain. 3 months had passed since that terrible dinner. True to his word, Daniel had transferred $10 million into her account. Sarah had used some of it to move into a nicer apartment. Nothing too fancy, just something comfortable and safe. She'd also donated $1 million to a scholarship fund for students studying computer science and engineering. It seemed appropriate. The rest of the money sat in investments, carefully managed by a financial advisor. Sarah had quit her job at Henderson Industries, or what used to be Henderson Industries. The Matsuda Corporation had taken over, and while they hadn't gutted the company like her father feared, they had made major changes. Richard was no longer CEO. Marcus was no longer on the board. The Henderson family was broken. Her parents barely spoke to her. When they did, it was only to blame her for everything that had happened. Victoria had moved to Los Angeles to pursue an acting career, or that's what she claimed. Really, she just wanted to get away from the shame and gossip. Marcus was the only one who occasionally called Sarah. Usually when he needed money, which Sarah always refused to give him. Some people never learn, Rachel had said when Sarah told her about Marcus's latest request for a loan. Rachel was the only person who still talked to Sarah regularly. The only real friend she had left. "You okay?" a voice asked. Sarah looked up to see Rachel sliding into the seat across from her, shaking rain from her umbrella. "Yeah," Sarah said softly. "Just thinking." "About him?" Rachel asked gently. Sarah nodded. She didn't need to explain who him was. "Have you tried to contact him?" Rachel asked. "No," Sarah said. "He said goodbye. He meant it. I need to respect that." "But you still love him," Rachel said. It wasn't a question. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded again. "I never stopped loving him," Sarah admitted. "I just stopped believing in him. And that was worse." Rachel reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. "You know what I think?" Rachel said. "I think you need to let yourself heal. Stop punishing yourself. You made a mistake. A big one, yes. But you're not the same person you were 5 years ago." "How do you know?" Sarah asked. "Because the old Sarah would have kept the secret," Rachel said firmly. "The old Sarah would have let her family keep fawning over Daniel while pretending she didn't know him. But you told the truth. Even when it cost you everything. That takes courage." Sarah managed a small smile. "Thanks, Rach." "Now," Rachel said, pulling out her phone. "I have some news that might cheer you up. Remember that business idea you told me about? The consulting firm for small businesses." Sarah had been playing with the idea of starting her own business, using her experience and her new financial freedom to help small companies with their operations and management. "Yeah," Sarah said cautiously. "I did some research," Rachel said, showing Sarah her phone. "There's a huge market for it. And you have the skills, the knowledge, and the funding. I think you should do it." Sarah looked at the research Rachel had compiled. It was thorough and promising. "You really think I could?" Sarah asked. "I don't think you could," Rachel said with a grin. "I know you could." For the first time in 3 months, Sarah felt a little spark of hope. Maybe she couldn't fix the past. Maybe she couldn't get Daniel back. Maybe she couldn't repair her relationship with her family. But maybe, just maybe, she could build something new. Something that was entirely her own. "Okay," Sarah said, taking a deep breath. "Let's do it." Rachel's face lit up. "Really? Really?" Sarah said, feeling more certain with each word. "I'm going to start a business. I'm going to help people. I'm going to build something I'm proud of. That's my girl," Rachel said excitedly. "What are you going to call it?" Sarah thought for a moment. Then she smiled, a real, genuine smile. Second chances consulting, Sarah said. Because everyone deserves a second chance. Even me. Daniel Carter stood in his new office on the 52nd floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. The view was breathtaking. He could see the entire city spread out below him like a glowing map. His assistant, Jennifer, knocked on the door. Mr. Carter? Your 3 p.m. meeting is here. Thank you, Jennifer, Daniel said. I'll be right there. He straightened his tie and grabbed his tablet. Another investment opportunity to review. Another company to potentially acquire. Another day in his new life. The last 6 months had been good. Productive. His company had grown even larger. He'd made several successful investments. He'd been featured in Forbes and Business Insider. By all measures, Daniel Carter was winning at life. So why did he still feel empty? He walked into the conference room where 3 businessmen in expensive suits were waiting to pitch their startup idea. The meeting went well. Daniel asked smart questions, made notes, and promised to get back to them within a week. After they left, Daniel sat alone in the conference room, staring at his notes without really seeing them. His phone buzzed. A message from Jennifer. Jennifer, don't forget, charity gala tonight at 7 p.m. You're the guest of honor. Daniel sighed. Another fancy party. More networking. More small talk with people who only cared about his money. He used to enjoy these events. They made him feel successful, validated, important. But lately they just made him feel lonely. Daniel pulled out his personal phone, the one only a handful of people had the number to. He scrolled through his contacts and stopped at one name. Sarah Henderson. He hadn't deleted her contact. He didn't know why. Maybe as a reminder. Maybe as a punishment. Maybe as a hope he wouldn't admit to having. His finger hovered over her name. Don't do it, he told himself. You said goodbye. You meant it. Move on. But some part of him, a part he tried very hard to ignore, wondered what she was doing. If she was okay. If she ever thought about him. He put his phone away without calling. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. Sarah stood outside the small apartment building on Riverside Drive. The same building where she and Daniel had lived together all those years ago. She wasn't living here anymore. She had a nice place downtown now, close to her office, but she'd come back to this neighborhood for a reason. Second Chances Consulting had grown beyond her wildest dreams. In 1 year, she'd helped 15 small businesses improve their operations, increase their profits, and avoid bankruptcy. She had a small team of employees. She had clients who respected her. She had built something real. And today, she was meeting with a potential new client. A young couple trying to start a tech company out of their tiny apartment. Sarah smiled as she walked up the stairs. It reminded her so much of Daniel. Young, ambitious, full of dreams that other people didn't believe in. Maybe that's why she'd chosen this particular career. Helping people like Daniel. People who just needed someone to believe in them. She knocked on the door of apartment 3B. A young woman answered, looking tired but hopeful. Ms. Henderson? Please call me Sarah, Sarah said warmly. And you must be Maya? Yes. Come in. Come in. Maya said excitedly. My husband Jake is just setting up the presentation. Sarah walked into the tiny apartment and felt a wave of nostalgia. It looked almost exactly like her old place had. Small kitchen. Cramped living room. A second bedroom converted into an office where a young man hunched over a laptop surrounded by papers and coffee cups. Just like Daniel used to do. Jake, Ms. Henderson is here, Maya called out. Jake emerged from the office, adjusting his glasses. He looked nervous. Thank you so much for coming. We know you're really busy and important now. I'm not that important, Sarah said with a gentle smile. And I was exactly where you are once. Well, my husband was. He used to work day and night on his project, just like you. Really? Jake asked. Did it work out? Sarah's smile became a little sad. His project? Yes. It made him a billionaire. Our marriage? No, that didn't work out. Maya and Jake exchanged glances. I'm sorry, Maya said softly. Don't be, Sarah said. I made my choices. and I learned from them. That's why I'm here, to make sure you two don't make the same mistakes I did." She sat down on their couch. "Now," Sarah said, pulling out her tablet, "tell me about this project you're working on. And don't leave anything out. I want to hear everything." For the next 2 hours, Jake and Maya pitched their idea. An app that connected freelance workers with short-term projects. It was smart, innovative. With the right support, it could actually work. "I love it," Sarah said honestly. "With some adjustments and proper business planning, this could be really successful." Jake's face lit up. "Really? You really think so?" "I do," Sarah said. "But I need to know, are you two in this together? For the long haul? Because building a business is hard. Really hard. There will be times when you want to give up. Times when it seems impossible." Maya reached over and took Jake's hand. "We're in this together. No matter what." Sarah felt her chest tighten with emotion. She'd said those same words once. To Daniel. At their wedding. "We're in this together. No matter what." But she hadn't meant it. Not really. Not when it got hard. "Then I'll help you," Sarah said, blinking back tears. "We'll create a proper business plan. I'll introduce you to some investors. We'll make this work." Jake and Maya hugged each other excitedly, thanking Sarah over and over. As Sarah gathered her things to leave, Maya walked her to the door. "Can I ask you something personal?" Maya said quietly. "Sure," Sarah said. "Your husband, the one who became a billionaire," Maya said. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed with him?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Every day," Sarah admitted. "Every single day." "Have you tried to reach out to him?" Maya asked. "Maybe it's not too late?" Sarah shook her head. "It's too late. Some mistakes. You can't undo them. You just have to live with them and try to be better." She smiled at Maya, even though it hurt. "But you and Jake," Sarah said. "You can do what I didn't. You can stick together. Believe in each other. Don't let anyone, not family, not friends, not society, make you doubt your partner." "We won't," Maya promised. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything." As Sarah walked back to her car, she felt both sad and hopeful at the same time. Sad for what she'd lost. Hopeful for what she'd found. She couldn't change her past, but she could use it to help others avoid her mistakes. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. It was a beautiful spring day when Sarah's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. "Hello," Sarah answered. "Ms. Henderson?" An unfamiliar woman's voice said. "This is Jennifer Park. I'm calling from Carter Enterprises." Sarah's heart stopped. Carter Enterprises. Daniel's company. Yes, this is Sarah Henderson," Sarah managed to say. "Mr. Carter would like to schedule a meeting with you," Jennifer said professionally. "Are you available next Tuesday at 2 p.m.? "A meeting?" Sarah asked, confused. "About what?" "Mr. Carter didn't provide details," Jennifer said. "Just that it was important and he specifically requested to meet with you." Sarah's mind was racing. Why would Daniel want to meet with her after 2 years of silence? Yes, Sarah said. "I can do Tuesday at 2 p.m. "Excellent," Jennifer said. "The meeting will be at the Ritz-Carlton downtown. Mr. Carter will meet you in the Oak Room restaurant. Business casual attire is appropriate." "Okay," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. "Thank you." After she hung up, Sarah just stared at her phone for 10 minutes straight. Daniel wanted to see her. After 2 years. Why? Tuesday came too quickly and too slowly at the same time. Sarah changed her outfit 4 times before finally settling on a simple navy blue dress with a blazer. Professional but not too formal. She arrived at the Ritz-Carlton 15 minutes early and waited in the lobby, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. At exactly 2 p.m., she walked into the Oak Room, and there he was. Daniel sat at a table by the window, looking older and somehow even more handsome than she remembered. His hair had a few gray streaks now. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. When he saw her, he stood up. "Sarah," he said. "Thank you for coming." "Daniel," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. They shook hands formally, like strangers, like business associates, and it broke Sarah's heart a little. They sat down. An awkward silence hung between them. "You look good," Daniel said finally. "Healthy. Happy." "Thank you," Sarah said. "So do you." Another silence. "I heard about your company," Daniel said. "Second Chances Consulting. I've been keeping tabs on you. I hope that's not creepy." Sarah managed a small smile. "No more creepy than me Googling you every few months to see what you're up to." Daniel smiled too. A real smile that reached his eyes. Yeah, Sarah admitted. The waiter came and took their drink orders. After he left, Daniel leaned forward. "I asked you here for a reason," Daniel said seriously. "I figured," Sarah said. "What's going on?" Daniel pulled out a folder and slid it across the table to her. Sarah opened it and her eyes went wide. Inside was a business proposal. A detailed, professional proposal for a partnership between Carter Enterprises and Second Chances Consulting. "You want to partner with me?" Sarah asked in disbelief. "Not exactly," Daniel said. "I want to invest in your company. A significant investment. Enough to expand nationally, maybe even internationally." Sarah looked up at him, confused. "Why?" "Because you're good at what you do," Daniel said simply. "I've reviewed your case studies. Your success rate is impressive. You have a gift for seeing potential in people and businesses that others overlook." He paused. "I wonder where you learned that," he said softly. Sarah felt tears forming but blinked them away. "Daniel," she said carefully, "is this really about business? Or is there something else?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Honestly," he said, "I don't know." He ran a hand through his hair. A gesture Sarah remembered from years ago when he was stressed or uncertain. "For 2 years, I've told myself I was over it," Daniel said. "Over you, over us, over everything that happened. I moved to New York. I built my company even bigger. I dated other people. Beautiful, successful women who would never leave me." He looked directly into Sarah's eyes. "But none of them were you," Daniel said quietly. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "I know I said some doors should stay closed," Daniel continued. "And maybe I was right. Maybe we hurt each other too much. Maybe there's too much history. But," Sarah whispered. "But," Daniel said, a small smile playing on his lips, "I also said I believed in second chances. And it seems a little hypocritical for me to believe everyone else deserves a second chance except us." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face now. She didn't try to stop them. "What are you saying, Daniel?" she asked. Daniel reached across the table and gently took her hand. It was the first time they'd really touched in 2 years. "I'm saying," Daniel said slowly, "that I'd like to try again. Not as the people we were. We're both different now. But as the people we've become." "I hurt you," Sarah said, crying openly now. "I gave up on you. I didn't believe in you." "I know," Daniel said. "And I hurt you too. I was cold. I was vengeful. I made you suffer. We both made mistakes," Sarah said. "Huge mistakes," Daniel agreed. They sat there, holding hands across the table, both crying a little, both smiling a little. "So where do we start?" Sarah finally asked. "How about dinner?" Daniel suggested. "A real dinner. Just you and me. No family. No business. No pretending." Sarah laughed through her tears. "That sounds perfect. And then," Daniel said, "we take it slow. We get to know each other again. We don't rush anything. We just see what happens." "What if it doesn't work?" Sarah asked. "What if we can't get past everything that happened?" Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "Then at least we tried," he said. "At least we gave ourselves a real second chance. And that's more than most people get." Sarah nodded. "Okay, let's try." The wedding was small and intimate, just close friends and a few family members. Sarah stood in front of the mirror in her simple white dress, looking at her reflection. "You ready?" Rachel asked, adjusting Sarah's veil. "More than ready," Sarah said with a genuine smile. It had taken time. Lots of time. Sarah and Daniel had dated for 3 years before he proposed. They'd gone to couples therapy to work through their past. They'd had difficult conversations. They'd cried. They'd laughed. They'd slowly, carefully rebuilt trust. And now, finally, they were here, getting married. Again. To each other. Your parents didn't come, Rachel said carefully. Sarah's smile faded just a little. I know. I invited them. They chose not to come. Richard and Linda Henderson had never forgiven Sarah for ruining the family. They still blamed her for everything. And when Sarah had told them she was getting back together with Daniel, they'd been furious. Victoria and Marcus had also chosen not to attend. They couldn't get past their anger and jealousy. And that was okay. Sarah had made peace with it. You have a new family now, Rachel said, squeezing Sarah's hand. The one you're choosing. The one that matters. There was a knock on the door. Sarah? A kind voice called. It's time. Sarah opened the door to see Mrs. Carter, Daniel's mother. A sweet woman who had welcomed Sarah with open arms and never once judged her for the past. You look beautiful, dear, Mrs. Carter said, tears in her eyes. Thank you, Mom, Sarah said. Felt good to call someone Mom again. They walked together to the small garden where the ceremony would take place. About 30 people were seated, Daniel's family, friends from Sarah's business, and Jake and Maya, whose company had become incredibly successful with Sarah's help. And at the front, waiting with the biggest smile Sarah had ever seen, was Daniel. He looked at her like she was the only person in the world. Sarah walked down the aisle, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. When she reached Daniel, he took her hands in his. Hi, he whispered. Hi, she whispered back. The officiant began the ceremony. When it came time for the vows, Daniel went first. Sarah, he said, his voice thick with emotion. 7 years ago, I stood at an altar with you and promised forever. And then forever ended. We both made mistakes. We both hurt each other. We both had to learn hard lessons about love, trust, and forgiveness. He squeezed her hands. But today, Daniel continued, I'm making you a new promise, a better promise. I promise to always believe in you, even when you don't believe in yourself. I promise to support your dreams, even when they're scary. I promise to communicate, to be honest, to never let money or success or family or anything else come between us. Tears rolled down his cheeks. I promise to love you, Daniel said. Not because you're perfect, but because you're human. Because you make mistakes and own them. Because you learn and grow. Because you're the only person I want to build a life with. Sarah was crying too now. Your turn, Daniel said with a watery smile. Sarah took a deep breath. Daniel, she began. I gave up on you once. It's the biggest regret of my life. I let fear and doubt and other people's opinions destroy something beautiful. And I've spent years learning to forgive myself for that. She looked into his eyes. But you taught me something important, Sarah said. You taught me that endings don't have to be permanent. That bridges can be rebuilt. That second chances are real, if we're brave enough to take them. She smiled through her tears. So today, I promise to never give up on us again, Sarah said. I promise to fight for our relationship, even when it's hard. I promise to believe in your dreams, support your goals, and be your partner in every sense of the word. I promise to choose you, every day, for the rest of my life. I love you, she whispered. I always have. I always will. The officiant smiled warmly. By the power vested in me, she said. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Again. Everyone laughed. Daniel, you may kiss your bride. And he did. As everyone cheered and clapped, Sarah and Daniel held each other, both crying and laughing at the same time. They'd been given something rare and precious, a true second chance. And this time they weren't going to waste it. And that's where our story ends. Sarah and Daniel's journey was filled with pain, regret, and hard lessons. But it was also filled with growth, forgiveness, and ultimately redemption. Sometimes we make terrible mistakes. Sometimes we hurt the people we love most. Sometimes we lose everything. But if we're willing to learn, to change, to be honest, And if we're lucky enough to get a second chance, we can build something even better than what we lost. Thank you so much for watching this story until the very end. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to this channel to support our growth. Your support means everything and helps us create more amazing stories like this one. Hit that like button. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought of the ending. And share this video with someone who loves a good story. What did you think? Did Sarah and Daniel deserve their happy ending? Should Sarah have told the truth sooner? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, remember, it's never too late for a second chance. Don't forget to subscribe.